The Toronto Raptors are 33 hours away from kicking off preseason, and everyone is very split on this team. Those who are maybe setting the Vegas odds are getting increasingly bullish, as evidenced by the fact that Scottie Barnes' MVP case is rising, Darko Rajakovic's Coach of the Year case is rising, the Raptors' win total has risen from 37 to 39. But there are many podcasters with a ton of questions. And I'm here to synthesize those 7 questions because as optimistic as I want to be right now, I am not delusional. And I am very aware that the Toronto Raptors have a ton of questions to answer. And ideally, we'd like to answer them during preseason. So, first and foremost, shout outs to all of you. Happy Sunday. Matt Vanelli saying Matt Vanal saying happy Sunday, chat. Happy Sunday to you guys. Can't wait for the season to start actually getting underway tomorrow. We see real Raptors basketball for the first time in what feels like 8 months, but I know it's a little bit less. And we will have you covered for the post game tomorrow. The video with John McCall drops either later tonight or tomorrow afternoon. So you can look forward to that. And I'm here to say I have a nickname for the Toronto Raptors. You know, they called the Memphis Grizzlies the Grit and Grind Grizzlies. It worked because GGG. Well, I would like to call this iteration of the Toronto Raptors the Rip and Run Toronto Raptors. And I really hope that catches off because it is a perfect embodiment of what they want to do. But as I said, with all the optimism that I have, with everything that I can see going right for this team, which includes Collin Murray-Boyles just shooting well, Grady being strong and keeping the weight on, Jacoby having a sort of surprise splash, Brandon Ingram and Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett all synergizing perfectly, Emmanuel quickly with a perfect bounce back, Jakob turns back the hands of time. The truth is, sometimes preseason optimism can feel a little bit like a 10-leg parlay, right? It can be like everything's about to go just perfectly right. But let's listen to the critics. Let's listen to the people like, Rob Mahoney and Waz and Bill Simmons and Bleacher Report and ESPN and all the analysts who have taken a look at this team and said, I'm not sold. So let's start with question number 1. And this seems to be the question on a lot of people's mind is who is Brandon Ingram? This is a multi-layered question for a reason. This is not as simple as will Brandon Ingram be healthy, which, is great. If he is healthy, that would be awesome. But yesterday, not a better, but I do like to look at the Vegas odds on things. Heard a lot of people say Brandon Ingram might be Toronto's most important player. He'll be their leading scorer. So I thought, I wonder what Vegas thinks of his MVP odds. They don't think very much of his MVP odds. Scottie Barnes was 201 to 1. Ingram was 501 to 1. And I think a lot of that has to do with A, impact, and B, health. And so it kind of comes down to this. Brandon Ingram had a vested interest last year in trying to prove to people that he can play a different style of basketball. He took a lot more threes. And then, he sort of forced his way out of a dysfunctional situation in New Orleans in which we are led to believe that he was not the problem. And in fact, the organization was the problem. Their medical staff was the problem. Their seriousness was the problem. Their fans were the problem. But there's a lot of people who are saying maybe BI was the problem. Not always the most efficient player. A lot of defense in theory, but maybe not in practice. A lot of long twos, a lot of fadeaways. Brandon Ingram is the quintessential super talented player whose impact metrics never quite add up to star impact. The good is that teams respect him. Teams play him like he is Devin Booker or Paolo Banchero, right? They play him like an all-star. Even though he hasn't made an all-star team in 4 years, it doesn't really matter because he's this super talented shot maker. And the Toronto Raptors traded for him precisely because they don't have this type of player. Now, will he buy into Darko's system defensively? Will he buy into 0.5 basketball? This is a player who's known to hold the ball a lot. Now, obviously, if you're going to hold the ball on this team, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb because nobody else does it. Scottie is quick off the ball. IQ is quick off the ball. RJ is quick off the ball. I've drank the Kool-Aid on Brandon Ingram. I happen to think that he is going to be very well adjusting to this lineup, that he came here for a reason, that he's open minded, but there's still that old feeling of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. This is a guy who's 28 years old. This is a guy who's played in a lot of different systems under quite a few different coaches. And the isolation mid range stuff that we saw in the scrimmage is very reminiscent of all the stuff he's done, drives a lot of people crazy. Now, I'm personally not against it. I think he's talented enough to warrant a lot of offensive freedom. You're not boxing this guy in like you're boxing in Jacoby Walter, Collin Murray-Boyles, even Emmanuel Quickly to a lesser degree. This is the type of talent that deserves a lot of freedom. But how much freedom you want to give him is really going to matter. Are you going to give him the freedom to coast a little bit on defense to preserve his legs? Are you going to give him the freedom to maybe hold the ball a little bit longer in this offense? Are you going to give him the freedom to maybe not go towards the analytical trend of taking more threes, provide a little bit more spacing, but maybe take a lot of long twos? I think this is the biggest question for the Toronto Raptors as it pertains to things that I'm actually concerned about. This is the biggest one. Here's the second biggest one. Now, a lot has been made of Toronto's top 5 defense after January 1st. After the All-Star break, there's been a lot made about, hey, the Raptors were so good defensively. They were so awesome. They were top 2 defense. They were locking everyone down. People are quick to point out the strength of schedule was terrible for the Raptors. People are very quick to point out that maybe teams didn't try as hard against the Raptors. People are also quick to point out Grady Dick didn't play those type, at that time. But do you remember who did play? Yeah, Davion Mitchell was off the team for the most part of it, but he did participate in some of it. Bruce Brown participated in some of it. Kelly Olynyk was part of that entire block of time. The Raptors were this really great defense. One of the biggest contributors of that was Jonathan Mobo. And Jonathan Mobo is probably not going to be playing 25 to 30 minutes a night. He is an impressive defender. Have you replaced enough of that in an aggregate between Mamu and CMB? Maybe. But there's still this outlier possibility that Jonathan Mobo was doing a lot more for your defense than you're ready to admit. There's also all these other guys who aren't going to be playing for you. As much as I may talk shit about the Cole Swiders and the Orlando Robinsons of the world, maybe Orlando Robinson's a slightly better defender than Sandro Mamukelashvili. Is that possible? You also have this desperation of guys trying to cling on to the end of, to a roster spot. And maybe you just don't have that this year. So Grady back, Brandon Ingram in. Easy to argue that Brandon Ingram is a better defender than Grady Dick, but Grady's still going to play. And according to Darko Rajakovic, he's going to play a lot. So having Grady on the court, even if you balance out a little bit of CMB, if you take out Jonathan Mobo, is this team going to be a lock to be a top 15 defense? Again, the optimist in me says they're going to be top 15. The hyper delusional optimist says they're going to be top 10. The cockeyed optimist who has no regard for his own basketball sanity says maybe they'll be top 5. Maybe they'll be Orlando this year. But the truth is, Orlando doesn't play anyone as bad as Grady Dick. Nobody in their upper rotation was as bad as Grady Dick last year. So, you can buy into some of the stuff that Darko was saying in camp. Grady is better. Sandro is capable. This guy's better. Scottie's anchoring the defense. He doesn't have to do as much on offense. There's a world in which this is still a top 10 defense. But regardless of whether they'll be a top 10 defense or a top 15 defense, the truth is they're going to have to do it very differently and with very different personnel than they did last year. Question number 3, which youngster steps up? Now, there's a lot of young players on this team that are going to be asked to do a lot. Grady Dick is going to be asked to take a lot of shots to the second unit. Jamal Shed is the de facto backup point guard on this team. You could argue Scottie Barnes is the best player on this team. Collin Murray-Boyles, for my money, is the best defender on the second unit. Every one of these players that I just described to you is under 25. You're describing a lot of young players. And the cool thing about young players that I think gets a lot of people excited is any one of them at any given time can take a jump. Who's taking that jump? Is Jacoby taking that jump? Is Ochai taking that jump? Is Grady taking that jump? What if Grady is legitimately a six man of the year candidate? How does that change the outcome for the Raptors? And how does that change your decision making around RJ Barrett, Jacoby Walter? Does that change Jacoby's future on this team? Does it change Ochai's future on this team? Does it change RJ and Ochai's extension possibilities? If Jamal Shed is just terrible, and I'm saying terrible, terrible, like awful, bleeding minutes on the court, do you convert one of these players who's not working out for a backup point guard that is working out? For all of his greatness on defense last year, I could make an argument that Jonathan Mobo was one of the worst half court scorers in the NBA last year. And I can make an argument that some of his teammates weren't that far behind from that being true for them as well. So I think that overall, if you're being honest, spacing is a really, really big concern for this team. And while I don't have it on my 7 questions, the spacing will be greatly alleviated if Jacoby, Ochai, Grady can just be way better this year. Question number 4. It's not really a question, but more like a topic, which is the quiet decline of Jakob Poeltl. Not much has been made of Jakob Poeltl's decline over the last 3 years, but it is very real. I promise you, as someone who is really studying the stats on this guy, is really studying the at-rim percentages, the shot blocking numbers, some of the rim protection numbers. Jakob Poeltl is not nearly the player that he was 4 years ago. When the Raptors traded this guy away, there was a different skill set. There was a fleet of foot, a switchable defender who could guard out onto the perimeter. There was a better rim protector. Right now, his skill set is almost veering more offensive than defensive, and he's still a pretty good defender in that he's smart and he racks up defensive rebounds. And there's definitely a lot of value in his connective passing. They're obviously trying to use him more as a hub passer last year. But on a team with so many plus playmakers, does Sandro Mamukelashvili just add so much more juice to spacing the second unit and maybe sometimes even the first unit? Like, can we see maybe Jakob play a little bit more with the second unit, Sandro play more with the first unit? Now, none of this is helped by the fact that you've just made a major financial investment in a player who is damn near 30 and is probably on the downside of his career. The question right now, if I'm a Raptor fan, is yes, we have extended him. Yes, we've locked him up. There is a really ugly $27-ish million figure in there, although the final year of that, I believe, is only $5 million guaranteed. So there is a little bit of trade value as a expiring contract in that second to last year. How quick could the decline be? With players over 30, you really don't know. You really don't know, right? It takes one off season, one injury, and it's over. It's over, right? And the Raptors really have been quite cautious about investing dollars into players who are over 30. They were pretty cautious with Fred. They were really cautious with Kyle. They were really cautious with Serge. They didn't want to give them like these 4 or 5 year deals that can come back and haunt them. They even moved off of Pascal. Now, every one of those players that I'm describing is probably more accomplished and a little bit better than Jakob Poeltl. So I think that for the Raptors to be good, Jakob Poeltl has to be like a really good center. And I don't think a lot of people think he's a top 15 center in this league right now. And the other day I was really like working on a list of 27. I believe I came up with 37 centers who are better than DeAndre Ayton. Here's a list of the 37 centers in case you missed it on PC. So it's Jokic, Embiid, Vucevic, Domas, Şengün, Jared Allen, Ivica Zubac, Karl Anthony Towns, Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware, Victor Wembanyama, Kristaps Porzingis, Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, Evan Mobley, Anthony Davis, Walker Kessler, Donovan Clingan, Jalen Duren, Al Horford, Draymond, Claxton, Chet, Zach Edey, Gershon Yabusele, Steven Adams, Luke Cornett, Isaiah Stewart, Mark Williams, Mo Wagner, uh, Miles Turner, Jay Huff. I said Jakob Pertl, Mitchell Robinson. I believe I put Luke Cornett twice. Did I put Luke Cornett twice? I did. And then you can also add in Rob Williams, and you can also add in Goga Batadze. You can probably also maybe explore the ideas of Wendell Carter, Bobby Portis. There's about 40 decent centers in the NBA. The question that the Raptors need to ask right now is he in the upper half of those centers? Is he better than 14 names? Go through it. Is he better than Jokic? No. So that's one. Better than Embiid? No. Better than Vucevic? Let's just put that as questionable. Better than Domas? No. So that's 3. Better than Şengün? No, that's 4. Better than Jared Allen? That's 5. Better than Zubas? That's 6. Did I even mention iHeart? Am I insane? Did I miss Hartenstein? Oh dear God, I did. Okay, let me just add Hartenstein to this. So we are at Zubat. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cat 7. Bam 8. Khalil Ware 9. Wemby 10. KP 11. Naz Reid 12. Rudy Gobert 13. Lively Gafford. That's, let's say, debatable on Gafford, but not debatable on Lively. That's 14. Evan Mobley, that's 15. Anthony Davis, that's 15. So now it's just like, now we're getting into Chet, iHeart, Mo Wagner. You know what I mean? Like, you end up in some very dangerous territory. And again, like, the Raptors have kind of been here before, where they hold on to an asset that other teams just don't value very much. Chris Boucher, Gary Trent, Fred VanVleet. These were all guys that the Raptors wanted to get off of. Is Jakob Pertl about to become the next asset that the Raptors want to get off of because he doesn't fit, and they realize he doesn't fit, but now he has a super long extension? I think this is something that is really going to become a question, right? Okay. Darko and Bobby on the hot seat. It's not really a question, more, again, a concept, right? But the question of how safe are these guys' jobs? Now, it's been well and good the last couple of years that the Raptors have gone through this development pipeline where, win every day and shuffle the roster and try to lose games and inevitably, tank without really ever getting a top 5 pick. Okay, cool. So the tanking has been horrible. Let's just be real. Let's just be honest. To tank for 2 straight years and to end up with Collin Murray-Boyles is a disaster. But nevertheless, you have a young piece. You did hit in the last draft. I think you got 5 serviceable players. James saying Goga, dude. Goga Batadze is a good player. I didn't say he was better than Jakob Pertl. I'm just saying it's a conversation. He's a stretch big. I didn't mention Santi Aldama. There's even Nisi. There's a lot of guys, especially if you're talking trade value. You don't want to have a 27-year-old center who has like the 35th greatest trade value. Winning will help, but if Jakob Pertl is not a big part of that winning, if he's sitting fourth quarters because of his free throw shooting and spacing concerns, it's going to be a really bad contract. Anyways, to the guy who signed the contract, Bobby Webster, and the guy who's trying to develop Jakob into this hub type player. These two are under the microscope right now. It's very easy to make a change at the coaching level. It's not as easy to make a change at the GM level. But that being said, through all of their search, now I have no idea what MLSE was looking for in their replacement for Masai Ujiri, but inevitably they ended up settling with the guy who constructed the roster, or at least had a hand in constructing this roster, in Bobby Webster. Is Bobby Webster's job safe if the Raptors miss the playoffs this year? I don't think so. I think for him and Darko, they're both gone if the Raptors miss the playoffs this year. Leveling it out very realistically, unless something completely catastrophic happens that feels like it's beyond their control, like a major injury to one of your starters for the entire season, which necessitates a tank, and the Raptors deliberately tear it down, and there's board buy-in on that level, The financial situation of the Raptors, the more you lose, the less valuable this franchise becomes, the more disengaged the fan base becomes, the more you lose market share in the NBA. This is important. The ratings, the gate, the playoff gate, all this stuff matters. I'm telling you right now, as someone who is a stockholder in the shittiest company on earth, Rogers, I don't think this company is doing that well right now. And I think they need the Raptors to make them a little bit of money because they're a very expensive team. So, as much as I didn't want to talk about like the elephant in the room, which is that the Raptors are over the tax line and who will they get rid of, I think part of that will be necessitated or dictated by whether they're good or not. And if this is a team that is super expensive at the top and also bad, then all of the concerns that a lot of the people around the league have about this team will be validated. At which point, the man who developed them and the man who signed all these contracts, those two will absolutely be on the hot seat. Whew. As much as I love this idea of rip and run, bro, we cannot ignore the Icarus issue here. Icarus, to those who don't know, flew too close to the sun. The Toronto Raptors want to bend the legal limit of space and speed in the NBA. They want to play faster than everybody. They want to pick up higher than everybody. They want to pressure more than everybody. They want to be the most physical team in the NBA. And they think they can do it through grit, grind, hard work, will, desire. But at the end of the day, you have a lot of really injury prone players on this team. You have a lot of players. And as much as I believe in Alex McKechnie and his bands and what they did with Kawhi Leonard and load management, I acknowledge that these players are humans and you can't treat them like crash test dummies. There's probably going to be a ton of injuries this year. Knock on wood, nothing serious, knick-knack injuries. But if you're going to play physical in practice every single day, now I believe that playing hard is a talent because not everybody does it. On the request or actually the suggestion of somebody in our community the other day, I went and watched a Saras video, right? Sarunas Yakuchevich, I'm saying his name wrong. I apologize. Was a Lithuanian legend, and he is one of the best coaches in Europe. FA, what's up, man? How are you doing? Call-in link is in the description if anybody wants to call in after these final two questions. But if you don't want to call in, it's totally cool. So, in terms of playing deeper, which is I guess what you're saying here, like that's why they're playing 11 guys. Dude, they could play 12 guys. If you're going to play balls to the wall defense, if you're going to be crashing the glass, if you're going to be running as fast, changing ends, pressuring all the time, bumping guys, playing physical, there's definitely more of a chance of injuries, man. There's always going to be more of a chance of injuries, especially when you factor in that this is not a super finesse team. This is not a team that relies on a lot of jumpers. So this is a team that's going to be driving. This is a team that's going to be, fighting over screens, taking charges. As much as I want to believe in this idea of, playing hard, there's a consequence to playing hard as well. Now, flip side, devil's advocate. If you play hard all the time, you probably don't get injured as much because you're used to that contact and your body adjusts. Okay, this is not scientific. This is total, hogwash garbage, but it's good and I believe it. So, who are you to tell me that I can't believe that the Raptors being tough in practice is going to help them avoid injuries in games? Look, man, last year we saw one of the most injury riddled teams in the league. Okay. And it wasn't all tanking. The Scottie Barnes thumb issue that he played through, that wasn't tanking. RJ Barrett's shoulder issue wasn't tanking. Emmanuel Quickley's first and second injuries weren't tanking. Grady Dick's injury wasn't tanking. Ulrich Shamshi's injury wasn't tanking. There's a couple of injuries where I feel like, okay, they milked it a little bit, so they probably step out of the numbers, but it's impossible to argue this team was not top 6 in injuries last year. So, if they were top 6 in injuries, I think it begs the question, how will playing even harder than that impact your injuries? I think this is important. Who is the surprise contributor? Okay, we all have an expectation of what these players can do, right? But the truth is, every single year, there's going to be a player or two players or three players that don't do what you expect them to do. Maybe there's a Sandro Mamukelashvili right now. Would you be surprised if he shot 29% from three? Yeah, because he shot like 37% last year and he's, a shooter and he was doing well in Georgia. But he could be an underwhelming contributor, right? Would you be super shocked if Collin Murray-Boyles shot 35% from three this year? Yes, because there's no evidence to suggest he can ever do that. He's never done that before in his life. There are surprise contributors every single year. There are surprise, fall offs and disappointments every single year. Last year, I could argue, for some people, Scottie was a disappointment. Emmanuel Quickley's lack of games played was a disappointment. RJ's efficiency was a disappointment. If you're looking for surprise contributors last year, it's hard to really find one, if I'm being honest, but Ochai Baji's 3-point shooting was probably the main thing, which is like, I don't think I could have expected this guy to shoot 42, 43% from three coming into that season. And so this year, the question is, who is the surprise contributor? Who is that person? Who is that one player that's just way better than expected? Some obvious candidates, Scottie Barnes, right? Now, I was looking at Scottie Barnes MVP odds because, why not? Take a look, actually. This is really funny. So, these are the MVP odds. This is not a comprehensive list, just so anyone's wondering where the hell is Anthony Davis. But these are the MVP odds that Vegas released a couple of days ago. And that's Shea at the top, 3-1. Jokic, 4.5-1. Giannis, 11-1. Wemby, 14-1. I think Wemby is probably, I would venture to say Wemby's my favorite to win MVP. So it's kind of weird to see him 14-1, but whatever. I'm pretty plugged into the work that he's done. You have Cade Cunningham, 46-1. But then you have Scottie Barnes ahead, tied with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but ahead of Joel Embiid, Evan Mobley, Jaylen Brown, Kawhi Leonard, De'Aaron Fox, Amen Thompson, Brandon Ingram. Vegas is clearly expecting a jump from this guy. Now, MVP odds are very interesting. A couple things to factor in for MVP odds. One that you absolutely need to factor in is health. Vegas looks at health. So if a player is expected to miss more than 20 games due to past injury trends, probably not going to be very high on the MVP odds. They also look at what team you're on. If you have a player who's better than you on your team, you're probably not going to get it. So LeBron suffers on that. If LeBron was on Cleveland, his odds would be higher. So that's not to say that Vegas thinks LeBron and Scottie Barnes are going to have identical seasons or that Scottie's going to be better than LeBron this year, or even that he's going to be better than Mobley. I think they're looking at it as if the Cavaliers are really, really good, Donovan Mitchell is probably going to get that MVP. And if the Lakers are really, really good, Luka's probably going to get MVP. I think what this is telling me is Vegas thinks that if the Raptors are surprisingly good, and the number would have to be like 50 wins plus, they would have to eclipse like 48 to 50 wins for Scottie to even have a chance at MVP. Now, the MVP is always like a 3 to 4, maximum 5 player race. Usually it comes down to 2, honestly, 2 to 3. So being 12th, 15th, 18th, 25th in MVP odds doesn't matter all that much. Those players almost never win it. Nobody here is saying Scottie's going to win MVP. But what would an MVP season or an all NBA season do for this Raptors team? Well, I think it would do a lot. There's a reputational issue with Scottie right now where some people just don't really see him as a very good player. Let me show you one of those people right now. Hang on one second. Pull this up. I was disappointed to hear this, but honestly, he's been ripping Scottie for like a good 2 years, so not that surprised. This is Waz talking about Scottie Barnes and the Raptors.
Like a credible Scottie Barnes is somebody I've just become down on. Like I just think offensively, he's just never going to be like a credible carrier of your offense. Like I think that ship is sailed. Like Scottie Barnes, I think that's what he wanted himself to
Sure.
be. I think that's why they ran Pascal Siakam out of town for, but that ain't it.
I don't think he's like the
Scottie Barnes is some.
Okay, so that's the NBA show. Waz is a major contributor on The Ringer. The Ringer has never really been that high on Scottie Barnes, but I think if Scottie can take an unprecedented jump up, that would be great for this team. Brandon Ingram having a resurgent All-Star season. There's a lot of talk about they want to get him back to All-Star. What does that look like? It probably looks like 24 points per game on really efficient splits, 24, 5, and 5. I think that could be really interesting. I took a look at Hoops Hype's top 100 players. They had Pascal at 12th. They had Scottie at 38. I think that's crazy. They had Ingram in the 70s. They had RJ Barrett at 99. That's now back-to-back lists that have RJ at 199 between ESPN and Hoops Hype. Now, I don't think most of those people watch the Raptors, but what if RJ Barrett is that surprise contributor? There was some talk on that very same podcast in which they were talking about why the Raptors won't be very good. And that gentleman right there suggested that maybe if things go right, they could be the ninth team in the East, to which I almost spit out my coffee. I think there's a real question here about what if RJ is that guy who takes a step up. We've heard a lot about the work he's done this offseason. We've heard a lot about like he's just locked in. He's also the guy in a contract year. There's a lot of motivation here right now for RJ to just come out, be lights out, catch and shoot. If RJ is lights out, catch and shoot, buys into his role defensively, and is just really, really good, how much does this whole thing just work together? Now, another thing they brought up is there aren't enough shots to go around. I think this is a good thing, actually. And I'll tell you why. So last year, the Raptors had a lot of players that played over their heads to compensate for injuries and lack of talent, right? They had a lot of guys who were maybe trying to be 20-point per game scorers that are more in reality 17-point per game scorers. They had guys who were trying to be 12-point per game scorers who are more in reality not NBA players. This year, if your question is, can the guy who could be a 24-point per game scorer take a step back and be a 21-point per game scorer to allow some of his other teammates to eat? I think that's a good thing. If you look at the history of really good teams, I'll give you some examples. OKC last year, San Antonio in 2014, the Golden State Warriors in 2018, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Heatles. Shit, you can literally pick any team that's ever won a championship. Chris Bosh takes a step back. Why? Because even though he's no longer a 22-point per game scorer, he still has that potential. Ray Allen takes a bench role. Even though he's not averaging 14 points per game, he could easily drop 20 at any time. Great teams have a ton of players who sacrifice. That's what makes them great. You look at the Shaq and Kobe Lakers of 2000, 2001. Shaq could have averaged 35. Kobe could have averaged 35. They both chose to average less. The Heatles, as I mentioned, Chris Bosh, but also Dwayne Wade later on, LeBron James earlier on. You look at the Oklahoma City team, because some of you are maybe newer basketball fans who haven't really watched those teams. You look at that OKC team. I look at a player like Chet Holmgren and I say, if he was playing for the Hornets or the Wizards, that's probably like a 22, 23 point per game scorer. He's a really good shooter. He's really fluid. I look at a guy like Isaiah Joe. What if he played for the Brooklyn Nets? He probably averaged 13 points per game. Having people who are overqualified for their jobs and are okay with it is the hallmark of good teams. So the question here of like, do the Raptors need to supplement, RJ Barrett for some? Look, man, this is not an issue at all. The issue is not whether RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram and Scottie Barnes are too talented to play together. That is an absurd statement. It is truly one of the laziest, dumbest takes you could possibly make, and it really exposes your own misunderstanding of basketball. Oh, Emmanuel Quickly, Scottie Barnes, RJ Barrett. Yeah, point to the guy who's made an all NBA team there. Like, what are we talking about? These guys are not too talented to play together. If they can scale back a little bit, right? Ingram can probably, if Ingram wanted to, Ingram could average 27. Can he average an efficient 23? If RJ wanted to, he could average 22. Can he average an efficient 16? If Scottie wanted to, he could probably put up like 22. Can he average an efficient 19? If IQ wanted to, he could average like 23. Can he average an efficient 16? And this is how it works. Is there's a trade-off between efficiency and volume, right? If LeBron wanted to average 35 points per game for that Heat team, he easily could. His efficiency would dip because he would become more predictable. He would have to force tougher shots. What a lot of guys like Luca, Harden, Cade, to some extent, Paolo, these guys who kind of rush to take a lot of shots, maybe as many shots as they possibly can, what they sometimes misunderstand is that sometimes the shot you don't take is also as effective as the shot you do take. The threat to score is the great equalizer here. Brandon Ingram can be a very good decoy. Scottie Barnes can be a great decoy. RJ Barrett can be a great decoy. RJ was more efficient with Pascal Siakam. Color me surprised. Siakam was more efficient playing with Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton. Why is it that there is a consistent misunderstanding of, oh, there's too many mouths to feed? The only issue with too many mouths to feed, if the mouths that are not being fed complain. If you have this bought in team culture, if you have a selfless leader like Scottie who's willing to take 8 shots in a game if it gets his teammates going, I don't think you have an issue. And as long as the team is winning, I think it's perfectly fine. It's when the team is losing and contracts have not been negotiated and handed out that players like RJ Barrett might look at their situation and say, why am I choosing to take fewer shots to appease this team if I'm not winning? Winning solves everything here. So I know that really wasn't the question, but really the question came down to who is the surprise contributor. I think you need somebody who is willing to do all the little things, whether that's Brandon Ingram, Scottie Barnes, RJ Barrett. If RJ Barrett is willing to just commit himself to being a lockdown defender to the best of his ability, he's never going to be good. But if he can just be so much better, that would be a surprise contribution. If Emmanuel Quickly can just play off the ball and not dominate possessions the way that he was and be a lights out, high volume 3-point shooter, he's averaged 7 points 7 threes attempted per game through his first 2 seasons. Can he get to 9 and maintain efficiency at 39%? That would be a surprise. Grady Dick, 12 points off the bench. That would be a surprise. Collin Murray-Boyles, 8, 7, and 5 off the bench would be a huge surprise. These are all good things. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in terms of the questions for the Raptors. I don't think I buy the doom and gloom outlook on this team, but I'm not necessarily completely, drowning myself in Kool-Aid either. There is a lot that this team needs to answer, and ideally, they want to answer a lot of these questions before training camp is over. They obviously have a lot of other questions as well. They have roster concerns. These are not questions that I mentioned on here, but they have the cap concern. Who do you cut? Who do you let go? What trade do you make? At what point do you make it? What's the cutoff? These are all questions. We've answered these questions before on this channel. There's also questions about the end of roster guys, the two-way guys, Elijah Martin, Chucky Hepburn, Ulrich Chomsky, David Roddy, AJ Lawson, the fringe roster. Very interesting to look at that from that perspective and say, who gets cut loose? Who might you need? If you're going to play this crash test dummy type of defense where everybody is going to be hurt all the time, does it matter that maybe you don't want to lose actual NBA players like AJ Lawson and David Roddy, and maybe you want to cut a guy like Garrett Temple loose, or maybe you want to cut one of those two-ways loose? A lot of people were focusing on Chucky Hepburn's pressure defense. He's not an NBA ready player right now, guys. And there was a comment that I really want to address. I want to address it precisely because it bothered me a little bit. And it bothered me because I think I haven't resolved it in my own head about how I feel about it. Now, you haven't heard me talk about Carter Bryant a lot. You've heard me being effervescently very positive about CMB. But there was a comment, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was by Noble Venom. And it was something to the effect of, "Hey, Rob, I know that you're still upset that we didn't draft, uh, Carter Bryant, but I think CMB has a higher ceiling, et cetera, et cetera." So I want to take you back to what I said the day of the draft. This is before the draft, okay? Of a player that responds well to contact, Collin Murray-Boyles. Number 8, another player that the Raptors are very likely to pass up on for Noah Senge. I love Collin. I really do. You think I'll be upset if the Raptors pick CMB, and I won't be. Shooting is a concern for sure, but he shot it a little bit more last year. Very productive, insanely productive player for a team that really had no business being competitive given the roster that was around him. I would have picked him as high as 3 to 4 last year. He falls to 8 this year, kind of giving you an idea of where last year's draft stacks compared to this one. Great high playmaking feel, great understanding of how to cut, great understanding of how to defend, great defensive technique, incredible defensive anticipation, just great at reading plays, blowing shit up, very high motor, takes contact exceptionally well, very crafty around the basket, just an exceptional touch and just a layup package. And he's not a vertical explosive type of guy. He, again, has a lot in common with Scottie Barnes, except unlike Scottie Barnes, he's even a worse shooter than Scottie from range. But unlike Scottie, his handle and creation ability in the mid post and his offensive game and bag and refinement is just a lot better, in my opinion. Defensively, he's a smaller, version of Scottie in terms of the defensive upside. He is about 6'6", 6'7", and he has about a 7-foot wingspan. Not quite the 6'8", 6'9" that Scottie was with a 7'3", 7'4" wingspan, but it is close. In a lot of ways, he'll remind you of Jonathan Mobo, but unlike Jonathan Mobo, just like Jonathan Mobo, he's a great rebounder. He's very physical, good playmaker for his size. Unlike Jonathan Mobo, his passing and I would say Mobo is a good passer, but his offensive game and touch and feel around the basket, he's not missing those bunnies that Mobo is missing. You already have Mobo, you already have Barnes. Do you need Collin Murray-Boyles? Well, I say when you have the opportunity to draft a guy like this, especially if he's the best player actually available and Carter actually goes above, I wouldn't be mad at it.
Carter Bryant's eventually going to be the defensive player of the year in this league.
Really?
Carter
on a
Bryant,
team with Wembenyama. Okay.
Carter Bryant. Listen, and I know all the regular NBA rosters weren't in Vegas. Okay, that was the first time I saw the guy live. I called 2 of his games.
It's crazy.
He was so much more athletic than the next closest guy in Vegas. It was mind-blowing to me. Look, everybody on the floor is a good athlete. These are NBA, these are professional basketball players, guys either in the league, trying to get to the league, whatever, Europe. But there's a lot of great athletes. We all can agree with that. Guys that play basketball for a living are great athletes. They're all over the place. What he was doing in the way a guy that's built the way he's built, how light he is on the balls of his feet and the amount of ground he covers and the explosive athletic ability off the ground, man. Now, here's the thing. The statement I made about like defensive player of the year or all first team defense, whatever his ceiling could be, Carter Bryant's eventually going to be the defensive player of the year in this league.
Okay. I wanted to show that because I respect Tim Legler for the most part. And I think for the most part, he actually knows ball. I think the Spurs are going to be amazing this year.
How about that?
Like, look at this play by Victor Wembanyama. It's going to freaking knock your socks off.
For everybody to see here. David Jones Garcia and Bismack Biyombo. And how about that on the rebound?
This is a 7'5" player coming up the court. That is Luke Cornett, who is 270 pounds. I want you to watch this play.
Victor probably had a notion. Now he's going to take it inside here. Works on Cornett. There's a little bit of that shake with the footwork and no cowboy hat either on the floor. I guess you can't wear the cowboy hat on the floor. Boy, Victor looks smooth here. Opposing one another's Keldon Johnson out top. Slips past Lindy Waters and sober.
Yeah, I think Sean talks about it all the time too. Like, these games are important for every single person, but
that's the play right there. I'm going to make it big for a second. Watch this. Yeah, it's serious. Okay. So, I mean, how can you ask an NBA champion to tank? Well, maybe you tank for that. I want to say this. I get myself in trouble when I say things like this, but I sometimes leave these for the end of the live precisely because I don't want to get in trouble for things like this because I'm kind of sick and tired of reading, you know, the hate mail. I take basketball very seriously. When I'm saying that a player is, really good, I probably worked very, very hard to come up to that conclusion. I watched 940 plus games this year between NBA, WNBA, college, high school, a number that I have repeated many times. I watched every single Carter Bryant game this year. I watched every single, Maxime Reynaud game this year. I watched every possession of Collin Murray-Boyles. I didn't watch all his games because that South Carolina team was asked to watch, but I watched a lot of his games as well. In the previous year, I watched a ton of his games as well. I've done a lot of work on these guys. I don't arrive to the conclusion that I thought Carter was the third best prospect in this draft on a whim. It wasn't a joke. And it's the same thing with Scottie, like, again, you don't know another Raptors media person who was telling you that Scottie Barnes is going to be an all-star. Like, when he was a rookie, there just really weren't there. I don't remember another person saying that. There might have been someone out there, maybe Flight Reacts or something like that. I work very, very hard as a scout. I do. It's something that I actually want to do in my life. Like, someone asked me, where do you see yourself when you're 50? And I'm like, you know what, working for an NBA team would be great. I do take this very seriously. So when I say Maxime Reynaud was my guy at 39, it's because I watched him. I watched him every year because I studied this. And, I'm really rooting for the guys that the Raptors picked. I am. You're not going to hear me, crying and complaining. You haven't heard me crying and complaining about Jordan Hawkins. You haven't heard me crying and complaining last year when Yves Missi came out and had a much better season than Jacoby Walter. No, like, I'm a Raptor fan. Understand where I am. Back-to-back years, the Raptors have completely gone away from the guys that I wanted. Okay, I wanted Yves Missi over Jacoby. Now, I love Jacoby, but Yves Missi had a way better season. Let's just be real about it. Okay? Some of you guys wanted Kyle Filipowski over Jonathan Mobo. You could argue you were right for now, right? Draft is a crapshoot a little bit. But this year, yes, for what it's worth, on my board at pick 9, CMB was number 3 among the players available. Now, one of the major concerns that I had was his conditioning. He's already answered that concern. He looks great. His conditioning looks awesome. So immediately, if I knew that he can come in and be in great shape, I probably put him over Come On. So let me amend myself and say, among the players that I had above CMB, here are the players that I would still put above him, knowing what I know now. Hang on, let me just adjust my draft board. So this is my draft board adjusted a year out. Okay, not a year out, 4 months out. Now this is with the benefit of training camp and all this stuff. I had Cooper over him. I still have Cooper over him. I had Dylan over him. I still have Dylan over him. I had Carter over him. I still have Carter over him. I had VJ over him. I still have VJ over him. Con, Trey, Collin is a conversation I can have. Now, it's interesting. If you look at superstar potential, actually put Collin Murray-Boyles as having a higher superstar potential than Trey Johnson and Colin Knippel. I don't know how I feel about that right now, but the one player that I think would rise a lot up this board, if I could do this again, is Jeremiah Fears. I've been really impressed with Fears all summer. I actually learned a lot more about Jeremiah after he got drafted than before. So if I had to do this again, here's how I would rank my board. Cooper, Dylan, Carter, VJ, Jeremiah, Con, Colin, Trey, Come On, Ace, Noah. Like, I would flip it a little bit. So yeah, Collin Murray-Boyles might move up one spot, but that's precisely because Jeremiah Fears also moves up a few spots. I still think Carter's the better prospect. I know Collin is more ready. I know that. And I think he's going to be really good. Whereas I think one player's upside might be all-star, I think the other player's maximum upside is probably still all-NBA. And again, maybe it doesn't work out for Carter in San Antonio. Maybe he amounts to nothing more than a poor man's Toumani Camara, at which point I'm wrong and the Raptors are right. Wouldn't be the last, it wouldn't be the first time. It probably won't be the last time. But that's kind of my point. Like, let's not try to reinvent history and say I was upset that the Raptors drafted Collin Murray-Boyles. I was just relieved they didn't draft Noah Senge, bro. So let's just keep it a buck. That's where it is. What's Carter's player comparison? I still see Tatum. Tatum with Toumani Camara defense is like the second best player in the NBA. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. You know, I've gotten to know Carter a little bit more over the last couple of months. Shout outs to CB. So yeah, I mean, it's just a feeling that I have that he's just going to be insanely good. But FA saying I still like Noah Senge. Noah could be really good too. It's really hard to make evaluations about 18, 19, 20-year-olds, dude. Before the age of 25, you really can't write the obituary on any one of these players. You can't lock these players in. There's obviously red flags. There's obviously things that players do that maybe move you off. Collin's jump shot is a real concern. Okay? Real concern. Really big concern. It's a set shot. It's not the prettiest shot. You know, who's better, Scottie or Giannis? Obviously, obviously Giannis, man. I almost said obviously Scottie. Huh. How do you think a long-term starting lineup defense with Scottie and CMB works schematically? I think it works really well. As I mentioned, first of all, Dylan, thanks a lot for the super chat. Appreciate you, man. I think it works really well. I think Scottie would probably be lower in I mean, they're both pretty good shot blockers. They can definitely switch positions. I think long term, I trust CMBs on the perimeter a little bit better. I trust Scottie more as a trailer. So there's actually advantages and disadvantages to putting them both. I think CMB is just so physical. He's so large, right? Like, so it'll really depend on how well he navigates screens. But because he doesn't have this super high hips that Scottie has, like if you've noticed, like Giannis, which is interesting, Giannis is not great on the perimeter. I don't know if people know this. I'm always surprised when I talk to like real hoop knowers and they're just like, Giannis is a good perimeter defender. I'm like, no. Have you ever seen him try to move around a screen? It's really hard to be 7 feet tall and move around screens. Like you're just not designed to do that. And Scottie has the legs of a 7-footer. So it's really difficult to put Scottie on the perimeter. Now he's gotten a lot better at it, but the screen navigation is still a tough thing. So having a player with a lower center of gravity on maybe the upper third of your defense and having another player with this like immense wingspan, switchability, motor, IQ, court mapping, I would prefer Scottie lower, CMB upper. If we're talking zones, CMB at the nail, Scottie at the low man as a 4-5 works really well defensively. FA with a really good point here. Giannis has the length to cover if beaten. I agree with you. It's more offensively that I am curious how this will look. Not concerned, curious. I'm curious how this will look offensively. Precisely because I don't think that either one is respected as a shooter. And I think that this is, you know, I mentioned earlier, I've mentioned in many lives actually, that this has been my most transformative year as a basketball analyst. I'm going to tell you why. Because prior to this year, I really felt that it mattered that you could shoot. There's a question that was posed on one of these lives that really perfectly encapsulates the basketball shift in my own philosophy. And that question was, how much does it change the equation if Jakob Poeltl can shoot 2 threes a game? And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Daryl who asked the question, which would you prefer, Jakob taking 2 threes or Jakob hitting 2 blocks? The fundamental question of 3-point shooting is very important to me, because 3-point shooting is not really just about the efficiency of taking threes versus twos. Because let's just be real. Marc Gasol took a lot of threes. He shot them at like 28, 29%. That's not an efficient shot. That's not an efficient shot. That's nowhere close to an efficient shot. So the fact that he takes them doesn't mean a lot to me. Jonas Valanciunas takes a ton of threes. Check his percentages. He's not efficient. Does it matter that he can take them? Very minimally, not really. What matters to me now more than anything, before it used to be, do you take them, do you make them? Right now, the question is not do you take them and do you make them, but rather, do teams guard you when you take them? Don't care about makes and misses. I simply care about, do teams react to you catching the ball, and how do they react? The number one thing that I want, which Brandon Ingram has an automatic, Grady has an automatic, right? Jacoby, Jameson Battle, Emmanuel Quickley. These are the 5 guys that if they catch the ball at the 3-point line, you're probably closing out hard and running them off the line. So the mere fact that they exist as off-ball threats keeps the defenders guessing. If I sag off 10 feet off this guy, will he catch the ball? I don't have that concern with Elijah Martin. I don't have that concern with Chucky Hepburn. I don't have that concern with Scottie Barnes. I don't have that concern with Jakob. These are important concerns. You clearly have a spacing issue, and Scottie shooting 37% from 3 doesn't solve your spacing concerns with Scottie Barnes, because until he is guarded consistently and run off the line, he will never have the gravity as a shooter. So, like, for instance, Devin Booker shoots 35% on his career from 3. Devin Booker is a very overrated player, just so we're clear. I know I've mentioned trading for him a bunch of times. Maybe I'm one of the people who overrates him. He's a very overrated player. If he was better, that Suns thing would have worked. He's not better, so it didn't. But 35% 3-point shooter on his career, that's slightly below league average, but his volume is above league average. He's guarded consistently as a 3-point shooter. He's very guarded. He's a very respected shooter. Is it because his shot is pretty? Maybe. Is it because he has a reputation as a shooter? Maybe. Is it because of highlight culture? Maybe. Whatever the reason is that Devin Booker is guarded, it doesn't matter, because he's guarded. And the fact that he shoots 29%, 30%, 32%, while Scottie Barnes shoots 37% for half a season, it will never matter. Because until Scottie shoots 37% for back-to-back seasons and changes this reputation of Scottie Barnes as a non-shooter, i.e. Kawhi Leonard, the shooting won't matter that much. It'll matter, like, in the sense that, would I rather Scottie shoot 29% or 35%? No shit, I would take 35%. That's not the question. The question at hand here is, really philosophically, what is the purpose of 3-point shooting? And it is really to expand the court for drives. That's it. It's to make the most efficient shot in the NBA, which is open layup, possible. And if you can't get to the rim, RJ Barrett. If you can't punish the defense on the catch, Scottie Barnes. There's 2 players with a ton of concerns in your starting lineup. It's ironic that they're probably going to be 2 of your best players, RJ Barrett and Scottie Barnes. So I think those 2 really, if they're the surprise contributor, i.e. Scottie comes out, RJ comes out, and they're both just hitting their shots, that would be the thing that unifies all of this together. Anyways, shout out to all of you. Have you covered tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that John McCall interview. I promise you it's coming. I've been editing it for a couple of days, trying to figure out the cuts and stuff. But yeah, really dropped the ball. Supposed to get that out last week. I'm also going to be on at some point with my guy, Coach Coach Mike Roach. I'm going to be on with him on his channel. Probably be on a couple times on the panel this week. So loads of basketball coming your way. The Toronto Raptors play basketball Monday night, Monday, October 6th at 10 p.m. on the West Coast. I am super excited. Dude, post-game live tomorrow. You have to ask that question. Do you know? I have been counting this shit down for like months now. Okay, I am very excited. Pensari loves Norman too. I do love Norman Powell. All right, talk to y'all later, man. Peace. Oh damn! Tomorrow night I'll be there, hoping Jokic plays. Yo, that's dope. I don't realize you were in Vancouver. That's pretty dope. WYSO saying Denver's defense looked horrible last night. Yes, it is true. The Denver Nuggets lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Minnesota Timberwolves didn't play Anthony Edwards or Julius Randle. Interesting. I don't know, man. My first look at those non-Jokic minutes, I think it was like -11 Bruce Brown. I don't know. I feel like Bruce Brown's going to become like a pariah in the NBA after this, because people just think that he's going to magically become who he was 2 years ago, and I just don't think I don't think that's happening, bro. I watched this guy be so washed for so long for the last 2 years. I just don't think it's happening. JV top 30 center. Oh my God. Yo, like, respect to Jonas Valanciunas and the player that I thought he would be in 2011, but this dude is really not a good basketball player at this point. I don't understand what the fuck they're doing. ESPN had him as a top 90 player in the NBA. My God, what? There are like 30 centers I would take over Jonas Valanciunas in a heartbeat. And yeah, Gershon Yabusele might be one of them. Anyways, I'll talk to y'all later. Have a beautiful one. Should have kept Porter. I definitely disagree with that, man. I'm very happy they got Cam Johnson. I prefer Cam Johnson way more than Michael Porter. All right, talk to y'all later. Peace.